that I had been part of creating a moment that this man had liked and had remembered for 20 years.
Before he passed away in 1997, James "Jimmy" Stewart left behind more than a legacy. He left a blueprint for humility, grace, and quiet heroism in American cinema. Stewart never chased the spotlight. Instead, the spotlight seemed to chase him, drawn to a warmth and sincerity almost too real for Hollywood to manufacture. Over 6 decades across more than 80 films, he stood not as a titan of ego, but as a man audiences felt they knew. The boy next door, the loyal friend, the moral compass in a world that often bends the truth. Though Stewart never formally published a list of his 6 favorite films, he did reveal one certainty. Among all his works, It's a Wonderful Life stood alone in his heart.
It's a great thrill to me to receive this trophy, and especially to receive it from you, Mr. Lunt. Thank you very much.
Out of all the 80 films I've made, it's my favorite, he wrote in 1987. But Stewart's career was more than one miraculous film. His legacy stretches across courtroom dramas, psychological thrillers, comedies, and war epics. Roles that captured vulnerability, determination, and the quiet courage of simply doing what's right. Tonight, we revisit 6 films that defined him, inspired him, and ultimately shaped the image of Jimmy Stewart the world still cherishes. Number 6, Anatomy of a Murder, 1959.
Well, be that no lawyer can handle your case, if you mean getting off scot-free.
When audiences think of Jimmy Stewart, they often picture the gentle idealist, the man with the earnest voice, the sincere gaze, and a heart full of Midwestern honesty. But in 1959, Stewart stepped into a courtroom and quietly shattered that image. Anatomy of a Murder, directed by Otto Preminger, didn't just push cinematic boundaries. It pushed Stewart into the kind of role that demanded ambiguity, intellect, and a willingness to stand in moral grayness. And he delivered with a performance critics still call one of the most mature and controlled of his career. Stewart plays Paul Beegler, a former district attorney turned small-town lawyer who would rather spend afternoons fishing than fighting legal battles. But when a soldier is accused of killing a man who allegedly assaulted his wife, Beegler is dragged back into the arena. One filled with shifting stories, questionable motives, and emotions that boil beneath the surface like a quiet tremor. This isn't a heroic crusader fighting clear injustice. This is a man sorting through messy human truths, case files, and courtroom politics with a weary patience only experience can teach. What shocked people then, and still impresses critics now, is the restraint Stewart brought to the part. Many courtroom dramas rely on explosive objections and red-faced monologues. Stewart did the opposite. His Beegler wins cases with subtle shifts of tone, a raised eyebrow, a gentle but firm line of questioning. It is persuasion through intelligence, not theatrics. A man who understands that truth, when handled delicately, becomes sharper than any shouted accusation. Roger Ebert famously praised Stewart's turn here, calling him a persistent, probing lawyer whose calm demeanor hides a razor-sharp mind. And it showed. Stewart earned one of his 5 Academy Award nominations for this film, securing his legacy not only as America's beloved everyman,
the Board of Governors of the Academy for this gracious and most appreciated honor,
but as an actor capable of deep dramatic complexity. The film itself was controversial, shocking even. It used language that studio executives found scandalous. Words like rape, panties, and intimate descriptions of violence were unheard of in mainstream Hollywood. But Stewart leaned into the material with dignity. He wasn't exploiting sensationalism. He was exploring the uncomfortable layers beneath civilized society. In a way, Beegler's quiet determination reflects Stewart's own career journey, taking roles that challenged him, but always grounding them in humanity. And perhaps that's why this film still resonates. Stewart does not play a perfect man. He plays a professional doing his job, pushing through doubt, facing uncomfortable truths, accepting that justice is often unclear. That quiet realism arguably makes Anatomy of a Murder one of the greatest trial films ever made. It's not the fantasy of courtroom epics, it's the uneasy truth. Later in life, Stewart rarely named personal favorites beyond It's a Wonderful Life. But critics, historians, and audiences consistently place Anatomy of a Murder on any meaningful list of his greatest works. If Stewart were to acknowledge a film that captured his dramatic maturity, the Jimmy Stewart Beyond Innocence, this would be it.
Whether spermatogenesis was occurring in the body of the deceased at the time of death.
Objection, Your Honor.
If you were forced into a courtroom fight where truth, justice, and morality didn't perfectly align, would you still pursue the case? Or walk away to avoid the ethical gray areas? What would you do in Biegler's shoes? Number 5. Vertigo, 1958.
Ways for the two of us
To wander separately.
Uh-huh.
But only one is a wanderer. Two together are always going somewhere.
By the late 1950s, audiences thought they knew Jimmy Stewart. He was the decent man, the moral compass, the neighbor who always did the right thing even when the world didn't. But in 1958, Alfred Hitchcock handed him a role that shattered all those expectations and exposed a side of Stewart that was raw, haunted, and almost painfully human. Vertigo isn't just a movie. It's a slow descent into obsession, illusion, and psychological vulnerability. Stewart plays John Scotty Ferguson, a former police detective forced into retirement after his crippling fear of heights causes him to freeze during a rooftop chase. A moment that forever alters his sense of purpose and self-worth. We are used to seeing Stewart as steady and grounded. Here, he is shaky, desperate, and unraveling. The power of Stewart's performance lies in how quietly the madness seeps in. Scotty begins as a weary man searching for meaning. Just another soul trying to find his place after failure. But when he becomes entangled with Madeline, played with eerie elegance by Kim Novak, something fractures. Stewart doesn't play romantic longing. He plays obsession masquerading as love. Hitchcock once described Stewart in Vertigo as a man pursuing death through beauty. And you feel it in every uneasy pause, every tremor in his voice, every longing stare that lasts a second too long. Critics didn't understand this film upon release. Some called it slow, strange, even uncomfortable. But years later, the world caught up. Roger Ebert would write that Vertigo was generally considered to be the best work of both Stewart and Hitchcock. And in 2012, Sight and Sound famously declared it the greatest film ever made, dethroning Citizen Kane. A moment that cemented Stewart's performance not only as iconic, but monumental. What makes Vertigo endure isn't just its suspense. It's the vulnerability of a man clinging to something unattainable. Stewart didn't play Scotty as a villain, nor as a hero. He played him as a man undone by longing, control, fear, and grief. There is beauty in that unraveling, but there is also tragedy. Stewart once said that acting was being able to feel deeply and control it enough to let the audience feel too. In Vertigo, he doesn't control it. He bleeds it quietly until the illusion collapses and the truth shatters everything.
I want you to look nice. I know the kind of a suit that'll look well on you.
No, I won't do it.
At the time, this role was a departure, a bold one. Stewart was known as the good guy, and some wondered if audiences would accept him as a man driven to obsession. Today, that choice looks courageous. It reveals Stewart's willingness to stretch beyond his persona, to explore the shadows inside a man who once seemed incapable of darkness. Vertigo is romance, mystery, tragedy, and psychological study. But above all, it is a performance where Jimmy Stewart stopped being the symbol of America's innocence and became something deeper, more fragile, more honest. A man wrestling with inner ghosts. Have you ever become so fixated on a dream, a memory, or a person that reality started to feel secondary? Where is the line between love and obsession? And do you think Stewart Scotty ever knew the difference? Number 4. Rear Window, 1954.
In that garden that the dog scented.
Like an old ham bone.
Like it, I don't know what pet names Thorwald had for his wife.
Before social media, before true crime podcasts, before we could scroll through strangers' lives with the flick of a thumb, Alfred Hitchcock and Jimmy Stewart already understood one powerful truth. People love to watch other people. And in Rear Window, 1954, Stewart gives one of the most quietly brilliant performances in cinema. Not as a cop, not as a hero, but as a bored, injured man stuck in his apartment, trying to make sense of the tiny dramas unfolding in the windows across from him. His character, L.B. Jeff Jeffries, is a photographer sidelined by a broken leg. The active explorer trapped in a chair. It's the perfect metaphor for a man forced to observe life instead of living it. Stewart doesn't rush this performance. He settles into the part like a man who has spent days, weeks, maybe months staring at the same four walls. Restless, annoyed, curious, lonely, and trying very hard not to admit that he might be losing his purpose. That emotional restlessness is where the brilliance begins. It isn't just boredom that drives Jeff, it's fear. Fear that life is passing him by. Fear of commitment, especially to Grace Kelly's glamorous Lisa. Fear that if he stops moving, stops chasing adventure, he stops being who he is. So when he starts watching his neighbors through binoculars, it feels harmless. Until it becomes obsession wrapped in moral righteousness. Stewart plays Jeff not as a pure detective, but as a man who needs a mystery to solve, because solving nothing means sitting with himself. And when he becomes convinced that a neighbor has murdered his wife, his curiosity turns to purpose. Then to paranoia. Then to danger. Film critics have long noted how Rear Window plays with the idea of audience and voyeur. But Stewart makes that idea human. He makes Jeff sympathetic, even when he's pushing boundaries. He makes you root for him, even as you wonder if he's projecting his fears onto someone else's life. You see a man grasping for control in a situation where he has none, physically or emotionally. Roger Ebert called Rear Window one of their greatest hits, and it remains a cornerstone of both Hitchcock's craft and Stewart's legacy. Why? Because Stewart does what few actors can do. He turns stillness into tension. He turns observation into an emotional journey. He barely leaves his chair, yet he drives 112 minutes of suspense. By the time Jeff's suspicions are confirmed and danger crashes into his apartment, quite literally, Stewart's performance has done something rare. It has made paranoia feel reasonable, fear feel brave, and everyday life feel like a powder keg waiting to explode. In many ways, Rear Window is Stewart's most modern performance. It foreshadows our world, where people peer through digital windows, speculate on strangers, and play detective in lives that aren't their own. Stewart's Jeff isn't wrong to look, but he isn't right either. And that moral ambiguity is where the film breathes.
Sure is the eat, drink, and be merry girl.
Yeah, she'll wind up fat, alcoholic, and miserable.
He isn't a superhero. He isn't the moral anchor. He is a man trying to make sense of isolation, longing, and curiosity. And maybe trying to avoid looking inward. Be honest, if you lived across from an apartment full of open windows, would you look? And when does curiosity cross the line into intrusion, or even obsession? Number 3. Harvey, 1950.
Wouldn't that get a little monotonous? Just Akron, cold beer, and poor thing for 2 weeks?
If Vertigo showed us Jimmy Stewart's haunted depths and Rear Window revealed his restless curiosity, then Harvey, 1950, reminds us of the quality audiences love most in him: kindness. Not the easy, polite kind. The brave, inconvenient, unfashionable kind. The kind that believes gentleness is strength, not weakness. In Harvey, Stewart plays Elwood P. Dowd, a soft-spoken man whose best friend is an invisible 6-foot-tall rabbit named Harvey. It sounds whimsical, and it is. But beneath that whimsy lies a quiet philosophical core. Stewart doesn't play Dowd as delusional, foolish, or comedic in the broad sense. He plays him as someone who sees the world differently, not as a place to conquer, but a place to be kind in, even when kindness costs you. From the moment Elwood appears, Stewart gives him an almost floating grace, as if the world's heavy edges never quite reach him. He greets strangers warmly, treats every person as important, and navigates embarrassment and mockery with a gentle dignity. Through Stewart's performance, the central question emerges: is Elwood truly eccentric, or is he simply free in a way others are not? The film's famous line, "In this world you must be oh so smart or oh so pleasant. For years I was smart, I recommend pleasant," is often quoted as comedy. but Stewart delivers it with a quiet conviction that turns it into a life philosophy. It feels like wisdom earned, not whimsy uttered. And that is what makes Harvey remarkable. Stewart never winks at the audience. He never mocks Elwood or treats him as a caricature. He believes in him, and so we do too.
Mother used to say to me, she'd say, in this world, Elwood, you must be, she always called me Elwood.
When Elwood's worried sister tries to have him committed to a sanitarium, the film turns from comedy to something deeply human. Stewart lets you see the fragility beneath Elwood's kindness, the moment where he wonders if the world has room for someone who chooses gentleness over competition. And in that tenderness, the film's moral heartbeat emerges. Perhaps the crazy ones aren't the ones who see invisible rabbits, but those who forget how to treat others with grace. Roger Ebert observed that Stewart's role in Harvey earned him yet another Oscar nomination, a recognition of just how delicate and skillful the performance was. This wasn't a fantasy about a rabbit. It was a fantasy about goodness surviving in a cynical world. It took courage for Stewart to play softness sincerely, especially in a Hollywood that often equated drama with darkness and seriousness with cynicism. Watch Stewart in this film. The way he pauses before speaking, the way his eyes soften rather than harden, the way he listens, really listens to everyone around him. There is no irony here, no armor. Just the belief that a person can choose to be pleasant even when the world rewards the opposite. Some actors need thunder to impress. Stewart only needs a quiet smile and a gentle word, and suddenly we're questioning what it means to be sane, or happy, or kind. In an era full of hard men and booming performances, Harvey stands out because Stewart whispers something bolder. Gentleness is not weakness. It's a different kind of bravery. If you had to choose and to be seen as smart by the world or to be remembered as kind, which would you pick? And do you think Elwood's happiness makes him wiser than the people trying to fix him? Number 2, The Philadelphia Story, 1940.
This is the bridal suite. Would you send up a couple of caviar sandwiches and a bottle of beer?
What? Who is this?
This is the voice of doom calling.
Before World War II reshaped his screen image into that of the principled American hero, Jimmy Stewart made The Philadelphia Story, a film that captured him at the height of his youthful charm and comedic sparkle. And yet, beneath its fizzy exterior, this performance marks one of the most pivotal turning points in his career. It is the moment Hollywood stopped seeing him as merely a lanky, likable fellow and began recognizing him as a genuine leading man, and an actor capable of depth, timing, and extraordinary precision. Stewart stars as Macaulay Mike Connor, a journalist assigned to cover the extravagant wedding of socialite Tracy Lord, played with razor-sharp brilliance by Katharine Hepburn. The setup is a battlefield masked as a cocktail party. Class tension, romantic rivalry, wounded pride, and biting humor swirl together in a film where everyone is far too clever for their own good. Cary Grant brings suave mischief, Hepburn radiates intelligence and steel, and Stewart surprises everyone. He could have been overshadowed. He could have stood politely beside movie royalty and simply played the earnest outsider. Instead, he steals scenes with understatement and offbeat rhythm. His delivery isn't flashy. It's alive. Notice how Stewart lets discomfort play across his face in micro-expressions, how his voice cracks just enough to underline sincerity, how his comedic timing feels accidental yet perfect. He doesn't try to charm, he stumbles into it, and that is what disarms both Tracy Lord and the audience. The Academy noticed. Stewart won the Best Actor Oscar for this performance. In a Hollywood filled with titans, he won by doing the most dangerous thing, staying true to his authentic, slightly awkward, wonderfully genuine self. There's a story critics love to repeat. Stewart didn't expect to win. He didn't even go to the ceremony. When the Oscar arrived, he sent it to his father's hardware store in Indiana, where it sat in the window for 2 decades. That anecdote feels like a scene from one of his films, honest, humble, and quietly humorous. And yet beneath the champagne sparkle, this film hints at Stewart's future complexity. When Mike Connor softens, when he allows himself to feel admiration, even love, for Tracy, Stewart delivers those moments with a depth far beyond romantic comedy fluff. There's sincerity there, a yearning that would later fuel his darker work in Vertigo and Rear Window. You sense, even if you don't yet know, that this is an actor who contains multitudes. What makes the Philadelphia story endure isn't just its jokes or its glamour. It's the emotional intelligence of its performances. Stewart understands that comedy isn't about punchlines. It's about truth revealed politely. He shows us a working-class writer navigating a world of privilege and excess without bitterness or submission. He treats every character, even those who underestimate him, with curiosity instead of judgment. In a film obsessed with appearances and expectations, Stewart plays the man who quietly sees through it all. He finds vulnerability in glamour, humanity in arrogance, longing behind laughter. And in doing so, he becomes the film's conscience and its heart. If you suddenly found yourself in a room full of people wealthier, wittier, and more glamorous than you, would you shrink, or would you find your own voice like Stewart's Mike Connor? And do you think humility can sometimes be a person's greatest strength? Number 1. It's a Wonderful Life, 1946.
I don't need 24 hours. I don't have to talk to anybody. I know right now. And the answer's no, no. Doggone it.
There are film roles that entertain, roles that challenge, and once in a generation, a role that transforms an actor and everyone who sees it. For James Stewart, that role was George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life, a film he later called, without hesitation, my favorite. Not just his best performance, not just his most beloved character, his favorite film among the roughly 80 he made. When a man with a career like Stewart's points to one story above all others, we should pay attention. What makes George Bailey so powerful and so enduring is that he isn't glamorous. He isn't a cowboy, a detective, or a man pursuing dreams of fame. He is ordinary. He is the everyman faced with the quiet heroism of responsibility, sacrifice, and love. The kind of life millions live without applause. Yet, under Frank Capra's direction and through Stewart's aching vulnerability, the ordinary becomes extraordinary. From the start, Stewart pours his real-life heart into George Bailey. After returning from World War II carrying the invisible scars of combat and loss, Stewart approached acting differently. There's a tremor beneath his voice here, a tension in his body when George is frustrated, a rawness when despair overwhelms him. That is not theatrical technique. It is the emotional residue of a man who has seen the world break and rebuild. When George Bailey pleads, "Please, God, I want to live again," it is one of the most honest performances ever captured on film. At its core, the story isn't about angels or alternate realities. It is about the unrecognized value of a life dedicated to others. George Bailey never leaves his hometown. He never builds skyscrapers or travels the globe. All his dreams feel like they've slipped through his fingers. Yet, without him, the fabric of everyone else's life unravels. His kindness reshapes a community. His patience builds futures. His sacrifices save families from ruin. It is a film that asserts radically that greatness is measured in love, not legacy. Stewart's talent lies in making George neither saint nor martyr. He is messy, frustrated, impulsive, stubborn, beautifully human. And because he is human, his redemption feels earned.
Look, Daddy, teacher says every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings.
That's right. That's right.
When the town rallies around him in the final scene, there is catharsis not just for George, but for everyone who has ever wondered if their life mattered. Stewart himself later reflected that this film changed the way people approached him. They didn't see a movie star. They saw a friend, a brother, a neighbor. Ironically, It's a Wonderful Life flopped when it premiered. Audiences weren't ready for its emotional depth just after the war. Yet, once rediscovered on television decades later, it became an American ritual, a cinematic prayer whispered every holiday season. It is now recognized not only as a masterpiece, but as one of the most inspiring films ever made, topping AFI's list in that category. Have you ever had a moment, like George Bailey, when you felt unnoticed or wondered whether your efforts mattered? And did someone or something remind you that your presence in others' lives is a gift? When we look back at James Stewart's unparalleled career, it's easy to admire the awards, the iconic roles, the longevity. But Stewart himself gives us a different lens. He reminds us that greatness in art and in life comes from sincerity, from humility, from connecting with people, not impressing them. Whether he was chasing invisible rabbits, unraveling mysteries from a wheelchair, surviving emotional vertigo, or simply trying to save a small town building and loan, Stewart carried a quality that cannot be taught: warmth with weight. He made us feel seen. He played characters who felt real because he was real, thoughtful, empathetic, quietly powerful. It's tempting to search for a top 6 list he never truly made, but the truth is richer. James Stewart didn't measure his life by rankings or legacy. He measured it by meaning and by the stories that help people feel less alone. It's a Wonderful Life wasn't his favorite because it made him famous, but because it spoke to something eternal about community, kindness, and the unseen value within us all. So now it's your turn. Which Jimmy Stewart film moved you the most? Was it his comedic grace, his suspenseful intensity, or the gentle humanity in his timeless classics? Drop your favorite below and share a moment when a movie reminded you of your own worth. And if you enjoyed this deep, heartfelt journey through cinema history, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more stories of legends who shaped Hollywood not just with talent, but with soul.